Welcome to the Midnight Writers Podcast. Helping authors become better writers. Episode 1. How to motivate yourself to write. This is John.
This is Lena.
And this is Ben.
So the Midnight Writers, we're a local group in Colorado Springs that have basically formed out of NaNoWriMo. We all got together and started writing, and then we decided we wanted to keep writing throughout the year instead of letting it fade off in November. So we got together and started getting writing meetings and putting together our own anthologies and short stories, and decided that we wanted to start focusing on trying to help other writers who are in our situation who would like to get started writing. So I'm John. I've been writing for small things for several years. I've got 2 short stories out. One of them is part of the Midnight Writers Anthology, and the other one's called Rite of Passage. And I'm working on a novel right now that I'm hoping to release later this year.
I'm Lena. I have been writing since I was a kid, and writing things that I didn't know how to name, and it turned out it was called fanfiction. So I was doing that for a long time, got interested, and then started hanging out with John, and he pulled me into NaNoWriMo, and I decided that I wanted to start writing more original stuff, and so I have a short story in the anthology as well. And I'm also working on a science fiction novel that I need to get out soon and actually finish something.
All right, I'm Ben Weilert, and I've been doing NaNoWriMo for 6 years now, 6 wins in a row. I've been the municipal liaison in charge of the Colorado Springs region of National Novel Writing Month for 2 years now, so that's exciting. Started writing short stories in college, just kind of as ideas came to me, kind of put them to pen to paper, but it hasn't been until recently with NaNoWriMo that I've been published my first 3 novels under the Fluxion trilogy, and this year I finished my second trilogy of the Constellation Tournament, and I've got ideas out till about 2030, so I've got plenty of writing left to do, and I'm always ready to help people with that process.
Awesome. So the first topic for this week is, how do you motivate yourself to write? So how do you do that?
If you can figure this out, you've got yourself set. I still struggle with it, and I've actually found that it depends on which project I'm on. Some things it's really easy to just pump out, and others I have to, buckle myself into my computer seat, turn everything off except my word processor. Sometimes it's finding the right music. There's a whole bunch of things that I have to do, and like I said, it depends on the project. I don't know how it is with you guys.
Right. For me, there's definitely 2 things. A lot of it is preparation. Like, I get excited once I see all the little connections and things that I can do in the plot and the characters ahead of time. So then I'm like, I really want to write this, but it's a matter of then the motivation for me to sit down and write is usually a hard deadline, like NaNoWriMo, with a hard word count that you're heading towards, and so those 2 things kind of say, okay, here's the goal. It's a concrete goal, and that helps push me to write, because otherwise, I have no impetus to sit down and write anything.
So I found something that really helps is trying to get your whole mind into the mindset of the story. If you know you're going to be writing at a certain time, before then, try to start thinking about what you're going to be writing. Try to start thinking about the story, what's going to happen, that particular scene, and just to put yourself in the mindset. I've got to be in a quiet place to write, personally. If there's a lot of distracting noises around me, I can't do it. So, and if there are distracting noises, I usually put headphones on and listen to some classical or other music. Soundtracks are great. So
Right. Yeah, I have gathered over the years a set of music that it cycles through occasionally, but it definitely focuses me on the writing, because it's usually doesn't have lyrics, or if it does, it's in some other language I'm not understanding, but it helps to drown out all the other noises, and even silence is kind of a noise that I have to drown out with music. So Yeah, I definitely have the NaNoWriMo and Writer playlists on my iTunes that I go to when it's like, okay, time to write, time to sit down.
So speaking of NaNoWriMo, how much do you find getting together with other people helps you write?
Helps me a lot more than I always think it does. I'm always like, oh, why would I want to pack up my laptop and go hang out with somebody? I could just do it at home. It's just fine. But then I don't do anything. So when I actually go out and hang out with people, I've got my laptop, they've got theirs, and we're actually writing, and you kind of have, I don't want to call it a guilt trip, but
You don't want to get distracted because then you're afraid you're going to distract the other person, so it motivates you to write just with that.
yeah, or even just easier where it's like, well, I'm stuck on this passage. They're immediately there to help you.
Exactly. But then in the same context, if you write something really cool, you immediately have someone there to share it with. And so yeah, getting together with people definitely helps with that. It helps kind of develop relationships and pull ideas from people with different backgrounds if you're at a stuck point. But the problem is, too, that sometimes if you know the people too well, it does get a little social. So you do have to have a little bit of structure when you're getting together with people. Otherwise, it does kind of devolve into just 7 hours of social time.
That's why word wars help.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's a typically NaNoWriMo thing, but we've used it outside of NaNoWriMo, and it's fantastic. It's a great motivator.
Even I found if no one else is doing a word war, if I just set it up and it says, hey, you got 15 minutes to write as fast as possible, it's kind of a competition against myself at that point, because it's like, oh, I did better the last time or worse or whatever. But those are words that I didn't have written before, and now they're on the page to work with.
This is the only time I can word war with myself is if I'm already really motivated to write. If I'm already in the writing mood, then I'll do a word war to push me a little further. But if I'm not feeling like writing, a word war by myself is not going to do it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for me, there were times where, I'd be finished with a word war and I'd have a lot of momentum in my story, and I'd just keep going and say, screw the rest of the word wars that I have set up. But it's a good way for me to kind of warm up at the very least, because it kind of it's kind of a cold start into something instead of, let me slowly kind of massage into what I'm writing.
Yeah, I always try to convince myself to do that, but it's a lie. There's times like you, John, you've texted me or something and gone, oh, do you want to start a word war? I'm like, I just got home from work. I don't even know what I wrote last month. Fine. And then I pump out like 600 words that I didn't even know were in there. So it's great.
Yeah, they'll always know when I join the chat room, because it's like, Ben has joined the chat room and he has started a word war immediately because he is ready to write.
Or 10.
Yeah, well, it's usually chunks of 4, but 15 on, 15 off. It's good to have breaks in between, because otherwise you do get burnt out and your writing starts to suffer, or at least mine does. So
I think one of the key things with NaNoWriMo that helps make that successful is, by the way, NaNoWriMo is the National Novel Writing Month, for those who haven't heard about it. It's in November, and the goal is to write a 50,000-word novel in 30 days.
We highly recommend it.
Yes, but it is a first draft of a novel. If you send that to a publisher, they will laugh
in
your face outright.
Do not do that.
It's getting
bad.
It's getting words on the page that weren't there before, because once you get the words on the page, then suddenly you have something to work with that you can edit, and editing's really where all the effort and work actually goes in. But if you don't have anything to edit, then that's where NaNoWriMo comes in.
Yes,
it has for me.
So one of the things that's great about NaNoWriMo, we've already talked about, is the community aspect. You get together with other people to write, doing word wars and other things like that. But also, like you mentioned earlier, it's a set deadline with specific goals.
Yep.
You're writing 1,666 words a day, and you just sit down for every single day for 30 days, and you got a goal to work for, and it's not an easy goal, but it's obtainable.
Mm-hmm.
If you
it's challenging, but it's not impossible.
Yeah,
right.
1,600 words is not that much.
No, it's not, and that's kind of the key too. Is that by the time that you get those words on the paper, especially if you've hit a really good part of your story, you just have the motivation and you have the impetus to keep writing. Suddenly, you find yourself, and I've written all I needed to for today, but then you already have the momentum. There's no reason to stop. But you find how easy it is, where you have an hour or two each day. And that's all it really takes to just sit down and write and crank out a novel, first drafts by the end of November. Or you could be insane and eventually get to the point where you've done 5 NaNoWriMos and you're writing essentially 3 novels worth an entire month. I wouldn't recommend it. Your significant other probably wouldn't recommend it either. But yeah, it's just a matter of, once you get in that mindset of breaking down your writing into smaller chunks, because everyone reads and they read in, scenes and chapters and novels and series just up the chain. It's easy to then break it down in the opposite direction and get the words on the page, and voila. It's just one bite at a time of an enormous project.
Well, that's the thing, too. It's like, especially with NaNoWriMo, at the end, you've got 50,000 words that you did not have before. Precisely. You have a story. Maybe not all of it. I mean, I didn't finish my story. I hit 50,000, but I didn't finish the story. But I have a lot I can work with. That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, sometimes motivation is looking back, when you go on a hike, you don't like hiking, it's tired, your legs hurt, you look back, look how far you come, look at the view. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that in itself can be motivation, is just seeing how far you've come.
Yeah. The end justifies the means a lot of the time, because a lot of times I'll have a great story in my head, and the only motivation to get it out is just the fact that I want others to experience this story. I want others to read it and interact with the characters and the world and the setting that I've created in my head that's trapped in there until it gets out.
So, for somebody who thinks that a novel is like a huge task that they would like to do, but they're kind of overwhelmed by it, do you think it's worthwhile to start with a short story? Just to get yourself into the habit of writing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with starting with short stories. That's mostly what I wrote when I was, getting started. I didn't really write anything even considered a novel until a couple years ago. But yeah, sometimes it's good for learning structure, for just, beginning, middle, end, and learning just how to have this thing in your head. You have an image or just this really cool idea, but putting it into a story form that's actually, got some context and, as opposed to like, I've heard of like vignettes, which are pretty much just like describing one little thing. There's really nothing to it. There's no story to it. But being able to make that transition into creating a story out of an idea, I've found is actually a really good teacher, because it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, and like I said before, I started with short stories in college, but the short stories I was writing, I was trying to connect them with either a common character or a common theme to essentially build out to an entire novel. Never really came to that. I think I got about halfway. I did about 13 short stories, and didn't really have any ideas for the other 13 that I was planning. A few here and there, but yeah, it really gives you an idea of structure that you need for a novel, because a novel, it's a big step up from short stories. It's a lot more characters, it's a lot more development. But what I found with my first novel is I essentially wrote like 6 to 7 kind of longer short stories that I was able to tie together with a single character, kind of like I was trying to do in college. And it's a matter of, you got to have beginning, middle, and end, but your chapters can have beginning, middles, and ends that add to a larger whole of the novel, having a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then eventually you get to the point where, you're developing ideas that are big enough that you can fit in a novel or a series or a trilogy. And it really kind of starts with practicing in the short story format.
So one last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this up is sometimes what really helps you to motivate you to write is to talk to other people about your story. Mm-hmm. Even if you haven't started it yet, but just getting the story ideas out there, bouncing them off of other ideas, other people saying, that's cool, you need to write that.
That is the best thing. If somebody goes, oh, that's a really cool idea, it's like, oh, I need to go home and write this now.
Yeah, it really helps. And if you get stuck in a spot, it's helpful to... I felt guilty the first time because a lot of the ideas in my first NaNoWriMo project came from discussions with other people. It wasn't really their idea, but it was something they said that triggered something that... So I felt like I was taking other people's ideas, and I realized, no, I'm taking an idea, which was discussed, and then making it my own, and making use out of it. And it could be a great way to move your project along.
Absolutely.
And make it better.
Absolutely. And it adds an amount of accountability. If you tell people you're writing a novel, they will ask you about it, because
they will.
Most people that you run across do not know an author. They do not know someone who's written a novel or published a novel. And so just the fact that you're a unique person in their life, that they're like, oh, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm going to ask about that, especially if the idea is something that they find to be interesting. And so, yeah, telling others is definitely a key to get motivation, because while it's nice to have people ask you about the really cool idea, if you're not motivated, they might nag you to finish it.
Yeah, I ran into somebody at Costco this week that I worked with like 4 years ago or more. And the first thing he said when he saw me is, "Hey, when's your next novel coming out?" I was like, wow, other people are watching. They're knowing. And,
Yep.
And I gotta go write.
Yeah.
and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for this week. Please come back and join us next time.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Midnight Writers Podcast. If you've enjoyed this content, sign up for our newsletter on our website, midnightwriterssociety.com, where you'll get a lot more great information. See you next Wednesday.